And welcome everyone to PerfWeb 64. I am your host, your humble host, Joe Basha, and I want to welcome you. The program today is approved for 2.4 Category 1 CEU by the ABCP, so earn your CEU credits here with us. The topic today is going to be the use of polypropylene fiber oxygenators for ECMO support. Very controversial subject, very topic. We're busy again as could be. Before I get into my opening remarks, I'm just going to tell you that we have been experiencing an uptick in cases. I don't know if y'all are out there as well. Very distressful and worrisome. Because I don't know that I can go through another wave of this. We have patients on ECMO, one doing great. I'll tell you about her actually during the talk. Very interesting case, and she's doing really well. I think we're going to get a really good success out of this. But the other patients that we've had that are VV ECMO ARDS from COVID has been pretty bad. I think I've told you all that before. Let's see, what do I need to do? I need to go through my my stuff, and of course, there's many viruses out there, right? Yeah, we forget about that because we've been so diligent and so worried about COVID. So I don't know what I caught. It's not COVID, but I certainly caught something. And look, David's back there coughing now too. Magic's coughing, David's coughing, I'm coughing, and sore throat and just feel like heck. So, and of course, I had to work all night, so I really felt like heck, but I did get a little bit of sleep here this morning before the program. So welcome again, PerfWeb 64, very excited, and I'm also by myself. Tammy is watching an ECMO. There's nobody. I'm it. I'm the last man standing. I'm going to do a solo show today, and it's going to be, David, what's it going to be? Best show ever. That's what it's going to be for you guys. Okay, our sponsor, HET, where I make my living. I sponsor myself. If you'd like to be a sponsor, you can contact us. You'll find our contact information here in just a moment. But HET, best perfusion job, best auto transfusion job, bar none, of anywhere in the world. So if you want a really great place to work with a company that does a lot of neat stuff, is very fair, has great compensation packages. Now, during COVID, it's derailed a lot, so our work-life balance has not been very good. I have to admit that. But things are going to, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not always going to be a train. So I do feel good about it, but best job ever. Okay, this is the best program ever, the best perfusion content conference program ever. It's going to be the best nursing content ever for critical care and other things. We got a lot of neat stuff still going on. Everything has been, a little slower than I would have liked, but we're starting to see the momentum starting back. So great. Everything's great. Okay, that's all I can tell you is I'm great, you're great, those guys are great, everybody's great, and we're all going to get through this together and move forward from there. But best program ever, best company ever. Give us a call. Go to het.us and let me know, and we will get you hired and working and having a great life. Social media. Make sure that you like us, follow us, and share on the the YouTube, the Facebook, the Twitter, and all that stuff. On the YouTube channel, please subscribe to the channel. We need more subscribers. Give us a thumbs up. Give us 2 thumbs up if you can. Click the notification bell icon. And please, 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 please make comments on any of our content. That is so critically important towards helping us continue to get high rankings within the Google, YouTube thing. Okay, so we appreciate that a lot. Our websites, There's perfweb.us, our schedule. There's perfusioneducation.com, which is a membership site. Membership is free. If you want to watch all of our content and stuff from there, no problem. If you need to earn CEUs, then you can either purchase those for the CEU certificates, either as like a what's that called? Like a per use or whatever you want. Like you can do like individual videos or programs, or you can get an unlimited membership, and unlimited with us is truly unlimited. I think it's $450 for your full 3-year cycle, and you can earn all of the CEUs that you need to maintain your ABCP board certification through us. There's live, there's SDCEs, which is the self-directed, there's category 3s, there's everything you need to get your 45 CEUs, ABCP CEUs that are required for your 3-year cycle. You want to contact us, contact at perfusioneducation.com. I got contacted just today by a researcher in India who is doing their thesis, and they have a big survey they'd like me to participate in. They found us, I'm assuming, through here. So please, you know, reach out to us if you'd like to be a sponsor, advertise on us, our platform. If you would like to be a speaker, if you would like to just be offer some suggestions how we could be better, topics you'd like to hear discussed, please just reach out to me. Love hearing from you. I will return all of those messages that I receive. So thank you. We have a call-in number. You can call 832-239-5358, and we will answer the phone right here in the studio. You'll be live. We'll hear you. You'll hear us. Everyone else will hear both of us, and it'd be fantastic to be a part of this conversation. So please do that. Our Mediweb app. Okay, no question in my mind. This is, let me see, I have to screen mirror again, David. Let me screen mirror, guys, and then he'll be able to pull my phone up. I'm trying, but it's there it goes. It just came up. Yeah. Okay, so you go here, and you can find this on the iTunes, and you can find this on the iTunes store, or the App Store. I'm sorry. Or you can find it on Google with the Google Play for Android devices. But you basically, if you look at the top left corner, you see Critical Care Perfusion app and IV MedCalc. So if you look at the Critical Care Perfusion app, that's a $2.99 app, and that has in it the IV MedCalc. IV MedCalc, I'm going to open that one up first, but you can see that it basically has, and let it go ahead and pop up. So you can have an IV dosage or IV rates, and so you can look through this. But this is really a nice gift to give. It's 99 cents. To give to some nurse that you like in the ICU, or if your spouse happens to be a nurse and you're the perfusionist, you both can have your own apps. But I suggest, if that's the case, of course, that you buy the Mediweb, the full app for both of you, because it's got a lot of really neat information on it. Now, how do I? Okay, so I close that. Then I go to this app. Okay, the Critical Care Perfusion app. And I'll let it run. Has a little advertisement about our program today, PerfWeb 64. I got the number right. 2.4, Category 1 CEU. So if you look, let's just say hemodynamics for the sake of this argument. You want to know what the mean arterial pressure is. Now I know the formula in my head, but for those of you who like to use apps, and which is fine, you take the systolic blood pressure, which I'll just put as 100. Diastolic pressure, I'm going to say, is 58, and calculate, and your mean arterial pressure is 72. So that's a very nice aspect of this. You have some hemodynamic monitoring. In the perfusion section, really the best part for the perfusion section is the perfusion quick calcs. You can pick your patient. Is it a man? 75 mLs per kilo is what, so the number there is basically what the blood volume is calculated as for men, women, infants, neonates, and preemies. We'll say the patient is 72 years old, Pre-op hematocrit is, we'll say, is 38. We'll go down here, the height, and then you can change this by changing there. I'll just put it in inches and say that the patient is, we'll say he's 6 foot tall. So that would be 72 inches. Weight, we're going to say he weighs 87 kilograms, so not a big guy. Pump prime, I'm going to say, is 1,300. Anesthesia volume, they always give a lot of volume. I'm just going to put a liter for now. Urine output, so this is a little different than a lot of the other apps out there because it figures, okay, you're going to lose urine too, right? You're going to lose volume. So you're giving, yes, but what about what's our urine output? So let's say our urine output pre-pump was 300, and you want to give 300, or do you want to give 400 units per kilogram? A little scroll screen that you see there will do 300, I think. And then you hit calculate. And now after hitting calculate, you have your BSA, your BMI, your estimated blood volume, your red cell volume, heparin dose, estimated on pump hematocrit, and then what your protamine dose would be without any additional heparin. So it's an estimate. But, you know, of course, if you put 10 in the pump prime, which I think most of us do, and maybe you wrap a little bit, which I don't like, but you do, you might lose half of that. So we'll say you gave the patient 30,000, 31,000 of heparin, and let's just hypothetically say you didn't have to give any more through the whole case, and the case lasted an hour. Well, the half-life of heparin is about 90 minutes, so you know you're going to have some of it gone. So I probably would give that patient 200 of protamine and check and see how they were looking, and then if they needed 50 extra, give it, but you're likely not going to need it. So whatever this number is, I would tend to give a little bit less, depending on how much I gave. But you can always go back and change that number to the amount you actually gave and get that actual number that you would do had you calculated that way. Then it gives you all of your calculated flows from 1.6 liters per minute per meter squared all the way to 3.0. So all these calculations are done for you, very simple to do in one easy to use app. And so I joke all the time, I need to sell a million of them, but it's really not a joke. I'd love to sell a million of them so that I could retire. So I'd appreciate that so much. You want my program you want the program to go away? Buy a million copies, okay? Maybe we can get Jeff Bezos to do that for me. It'd be really great. Amazon, and he can thank all the Amazon users and workers for helping me retire. You get everything in here: oxygen content, O2, DO2, O2 transfer rate, great to predict whether your oxygenator is failing or not, or validate it, very important, really good for ECMO. You also have a section over here for ECMO, specific. Kind of neat. If you look at your O2 transfer rate, it'd be very important again to see if your oxygenator is working. Your PF ratio on the very top. You have your ABG interpreter, Murray score for acute lung injury. But let's say you need to move the patient from, you're going to transfer him from your hospital to another hospital for further care, transplant. And you have pressure left in your tank is 700. And you're flowing, let's say you have a sweep of 4 liters. You have 1 hour of gas is what you have in an E-cylinder, which is the small tanks. So it's a very useful tool. I think it's really something that took a lot of time to put together, and I feel that it's a very, I think it's the best perfusion app out there. And the other app that I was telling you about, the medication IV MedCalc, I think is one of the best devices for nurses you could possibly find. Really good, comprehensive app. And that's only 99 cents. So very little to lose, a lot to gain. I strongly suggest you use it. Okay. What do I need to do now? Do I need to mirror my slides, the iPad, David? All I have to do is go full screen? Okay. So slideshow, presenter view. Yeah, there you go. How does that? Does that work? Okay. So let's go ahead and get this this show started. this is a somewhat controversial topic because we'll talk a little bit about oxygenators as we move forward. But you know, there's various different types of oxygenators. Of course, you have true membranes like the Cymed. Does not used very often. The typical old rolled flat true membrane. And then you have polypropylene hollow fiber, microporous hollow fiber membrane oxygenators. And then you have polymethylpentene process on those polypropylene fibers, which gives you the PMP filter design, which is submicroporous. And that would be like your Quadrox oxygenator or your EOS oxygenator. And I also believe the MC3 oxygen. In fact, I'm positive the MC3 oxygenator as well. There's probably several others that are out there that do that. But it's a controversial topic because, of course, polypropylene fibers have a fault associated with them, and we're going to really get into that. But there's some other reasons why people need to understand that you can use them. You know, we do heart surgery with oxygenators that are polypropylene all of the time. Now, we typically don't do 48-hour bypass runs or 72-hour bypass runs or 3-week bypass runs. But the durability of these things is very interesting, and there's things you can do to try and extend its life, but there's also times when their life expectancy is very short, and the only thing you can do is use a PMP filter or continuously change it. But there's ways to do that safely as well. So let's go ahead and get into this. Let's see. Danuta, oh, that's one of your, that's Polish. That's you, Magic. I saw it. I was like, what does that say? Okay, well, welcome, Danuta. Very pleasure. Polish connection. Okay, so let's discuss the construction of modern microporous hollow fiber oxygenators, and that's what you see. This picture here on the right, you have your the heat exchanger. It's not integrated, it's separate. There's been several different designs of these things over time, and this is probably a pretty old picture. But if you look up here, what you notice in the top right is represents this arrow, the blood flow passing through the fiber bundle. So you have your water in up here, you have your water out down here. This is your heat exchanger, stainless steel. You have your blood in, your blood crosses over into the oxygenator and comes out here, going again on the outside of the fibers. And you have your fresh gas coming in. This is a cross section, it's cut out, but of course it's potted and there's a cap on it. And you have your gas flow coming in and then your exhaust gas out down here. It's just one iteration of a membrane oxygenator, specifically a hollow fiber or a microporous hollow fiber microporous hollow fiber oxygenator. It's not a true membrane, but we'll get into that a little bit as we go forward with this. So we're very used to hollow fiber technology. So HFMPM is hollow fiber microporous material or membranes. That again, not a true membrane, so it's a little bit of of inaccurate nomenclature there, but for the sake of the technological terminology that's used, that is what's used. But in the 1930s, microporous fiber membranes found their first significant application in the testing of drinking water in most of Europe, particularly for Germany during the end of World War II. So we've understood microporous hollow fibers for a very long time. And in fact, in 1945, Kalf and Burke demonstrated the first successful, they say artificial kidney in the Netherlands, but we're talking about, of course, intermittent hemodialysis, and diffusive transfer of ions and metabolites. So, you know, dialysis as we know it today, it has changed very little except for the speed in which it gets done. But hollow fibers also have microporous hollow fibers, also have applications in industrial, laboratory, and medical. Not only our oxygenators, but also hemoconcentrators, which are basically a dialysis unit. That is, and you can see if you look here, it sort of shows it diagrammatically. But if you look here, you can actually see the actual fibers. And of course, these are central flow devices. Blood flows from the bottom to the top. And you go, well, wait a minute, Joe, that's not right. It always goes from blue to red, right? We make blue blood red. That's what perfusion is. In the dialysis world, it is completely the opposite. And red is always accessed, not because it's arterial, but because as you hemoconcentrate blood, it gets darker. And blue is your return to the patient, your concentrated blood. And we see that all the time when we're doing very aggressive hemoconcentration on pump. You can see that the blood coming out of the hemoconcentrator is darker than the blood going in. And that has to do with how much more concentrated the red blood cells are. That's the reason why that change occurs. Polypropylene hollow fiber is made by an extrusion process. The fibers are stretched to produce pore-like structures. The process, and there's some chemical processes that go along with this, controls both the size and the distribution of the pores. And this is referred to as the fiber's porosity. That's an important concept and word to understand. Gas flows through the lumen of the hollow fiber. So again, it's central lumen. Blood passes along, but in the, that's gas flow. Blood passes along the outer surface of the bundle. So in an oxygenator, versus dialysis, which is central flow, the blood goes through the inside of the hollow fibers. In oxygenators, it's on the outside, and it's represented down here. Here's this, they call it a quadrangle, but I call it a square oxygenator, okay? I'm going to be a little controversial today, but I'm going to ask anyone. You will win whatever prize we have in the studio. You know, we have great t-shirts, we have caps, we have surgical caps, we have all kinds of stuff. I'll send you 2 of everything I have if you can tell me one thing in the human body that propels or transports blood that is square. If you can do that for me, or a quadrangle, depending on which way you want to tilt the square. You let me know, you win everything, because I know, of course, I'll never have to pay that debt off. But here you see the blood in, you have oxygen in, oxygen out, you have the transition from the venous to arterialized blood, and then blood out. And what you see here is the blood path on the outside of the fibers. Here's just a little red blood cell representing that this is all blood. And the beauty of this process is that if it was central lumen, you could see you would have a mass transport or mass diffusion barrier would be in play, and your outside flow would see better oxygenation and gas exchange than the inner section of the lumen, or interluminal, if you will. But this pathway creates a lot of turbulence, which I'll be able to show you a little more later, and improves gas transfer in that way. But interestingly, in circa 1982, the original design for microporous hollow fiber oxygenators was central lumen blood flow, and it was the Terumo Capiox. And if you look here on the left, you see the blood coming in, going central lumen, and then the blood flow coming out. So the blood was going through the inner aspect of those fibers, just like you see here where it says O2 flow right here. Oops, sorry. Right here, this is where the blood actually was. And that's what you see represented here, with the oxygen flow or gas flow flowing on the outside of the fibers. On the opposite side, in 1986, plus or minus, Johnson & Johnson created the Maxima Oxygenator, which was the first reverse flow oxygenator that was microporous hollow fiber. It had easier priming than the central lumen or central flow. It was lower resistance for obvious reasons. It's not hard to see why that would be the case. And the more turbulent flow improved gas exchange by decreasing the mass transfer boundary layer, as I talked about. Diffusion boundary transfer boundary layer all means the same thing. So you see it represented here, the oxygen or gas flow going through the central lumen and the blood going through the fibers and then out to the patient. And in fact, here is the J&J Maxima Oxygenator. I used many of these things, many. And it's got a very interesting story associated with it, which I hope you guys will find interesting. Now, I'm going to give a little disclaimer here. I'm going to make sure that everybody understands this is a violent video clip, and if you're sensitive to that kind of thing, you may not want to watch it. But this is a true story. 1992, Los Angeles. The officers who had that were tried for abusing Rodney King, using excessive force on Rodney King, were acquitted in their first trial. And the city of Los Angeles erupted in a mass of violence. And there was a guy driving a truck, which you can actually see the truck in the background of this image that you see, this still, and his name was Reginald Denny. He got dragged out of that truck, and if you look on the right, I'll sort of highlight right here, you see a person, and he's holding something. This is what I need you to pay attention to right here. So I'll go ahead and play this video, and I may stop it. So you see it? It's coming up? Okay. Take a look at it. I'm going to rewind it and let you look at it again. But the top part is a reservoir. If you look at the bottom part right here, you notice a very interesting similarity in this design. This looks much larger because it actually has a venous reservoir that is attached to it. So I'll let the video play. Comes up, goes down, breaks apart, and the oxygenator goes one way, and the reservoir goes another way. So that was a very violent thing to have happen. But take a look at it again and look at the oxygenator. When it was described on the news, it was described as a cinder block. As a cinder block. But it wasn't. Someone, and I actually thought it was Reginald Denny, but it wasn't, because he was driving a dump truck, and I really got that messed up a little bit in my story. But there was someone who was transporting Maxima oxygenators for Johnson & Johnson to, I guess, be distributed or be whatever, and that's where that individual who threw it on him got it from, was a different vehicle or a different transport truck, and of course that's what happened. But you know, those oxygenators, I don't have an old Maxima oxygenator, but just to give you some idea, this of course is a Levanova EOS, which is a PMP fiber oxygenator, as in case you didn't know. And usually their oxygenators, the polypropylene, are yellow. These are blue. but this is round. As you can see, it has an integrated heat exchanger. But this is a very, I don't know if you can hear that, but this is a very hard piece of thick polycarbonate. This hitting you on the head is going to do some serious damage. Maybe not a cinder block, but it's going to be pretty close. So very durable things, and the fibers are, of course, all inside. This is also reverse flow. The gas comes in, goes through you see the pot right there. I don't know if you can see it or not. You can see it's potted, and the gas goes through there, exits the gas outlet port. Blood comes in here through the heat exchanger, goes on the outside through the fiber bundle, and then comes out here arterialized. And you have a place here for cardioplegia. We only use these for ECMO. This is probably just a leftover housing design, because generally speaking, you're not going to need this if you're on ECMO. But I guess you could use it for something. But that's an oxygenator, and they're very hard. So central lumen size of hollow fiber, and that's going to be this section between here and here. That the tube itself, the lumen of the tube, not the pores, have which is the gas pathway, are about 140 to 380 microns. The wall thickness, which you see right here, is between 25 and 50 microns. And that's referred to, so you know, as your diffusion barrier, because you've got gas on this side, blood's going to be on the outside, and it's got a 25 to 50 micron separation. And that is a significant diffusion barrier when you consider the alveolar capillary membrane is only 0.2 microns. So a very significant difference there. Polypropylene fibers are by design hydrophobic, and they have a pore size of approximately 0.2 microns. I'm going to show a little more of a close-up, but if you look here on the right side, you see those little red lines. Those little red lines are 200 nanometers or 0.2 microns in size. The actual pore sizes, however, are not uniform, nor are the number of pores in any one, let's say, area. The gas transfer surface area of a typical hollow fiber lung is about 1.2 square meters. The lungs, on the other hand, contain 700 million alveoli and have an effective surface area of 70 to 100 meters squared. So it's remarkable, if you will, that these lungs that has a surface area of 1.2 square meters or meters squared can take venous blood at a saturation of 60 and a flow of 5 liters a minute and produce arterialized blood with a PO2 of 350 all day long with no problem. Blow off CO2 from, let's say you had a patient who was producing high CO2 for whatever reason. You could blow it off from a PCO2 of 50, 52, 55, all the way down to coming out of the oxygenator of 30, 35, no problem. So a very efficient device given its diminutive size compared to our native lungs. Where it gets real interesting is that at 5 liters, its rated maximum flow, it's going to work fine. But your lungs and us can be in situations where we have cardiac outputs of 12 liters, 14 liters, some athletes 20 liters. So when you talk about gas transfer surface areas, you have to take into consideration what is the metabolic need, what is the cardiac output, because as you exceed that capability of this, by flow, not having enough time to go through for all that gas transfer, unlike the lungs, that's when the oxygenators tend to show their limitations. So keep that in mind when you have a patient who is on ECMO, who may also be septic, and who is very hyperdynamic, and you're putting them on for ARDS, and you're flowing 5 liters, and you can see a huge color differential between your inflow and your outflow, and you're asking yourself, why is the patient's saturation only 85%? Well, if they have a cardiac output of 10 liters and their lungs are contributing nothing, then you're only getting 50% of their blood, saturating it by 100%, and everything else is blow by, mixing back together again and getting pumped over to the left atrium, left ventricle, and out to the systemic circulation. That's why. And so you have to think all of those things through. And it's not going to be possible to flow 8 liters with this oxygenator. You can, but it's not going to work very well. Pressure drop is going to be too high, and it's not going to be very efficient in terms of its gas exchange. You may need a separate system in order to be able to do that. Okay. Here is a close-up of a polypropylene hollow fiber, and these lines again represent 2 microns, 200 nanometers, okay, or 0.2 microns, I'm sorry. And you can see that they are oddly shaped. Their size, if I rotated this longwise, that's certainly more than 200 nanometers, there's no question. You see the distribution is not uniform in any one section, and this is what they look like under scanning electron microscopy. So membrane wetting is a huge problem. Plasma leakage, whatever you want to call it, through microporous membranes. And the paper that was done in 1992, published in a SCIO by Montoya, describes in very nice detail why we were seeing plasma leakage or membrane wetting with long runs on polypropylene microporous hollow fibers. And what he demonstrated was that lipids adsorb, not absorb, adsorb on the surface of the hollow fiber. These phospholipids are naturally hydrophilic. As water is absorbed into the lipids, it creates a pathway into the pore for plasma to leak. And if you look here, you can see that with the phospholipids here, and you have the plasma, and you have the ability for the plasma to leak. And here's your pore wall. So you see this invasion of the phospholipid onto the surface area here and here, creating this opening that exists, almost like a fault of some sort. However, and with that said, another theoretical explanation is that the phospholipids that are adsorbed onto the surface will, because they are hydrophilic, will absorb water, causing the fibers to swell. Well, if you come back here and look at these fibers, here you'll see that if you were to start swelling this material, this would stretch, and as that stretched, it would become larger, here as well, here as well, and that stretching increases the size to greater than 2 microns. Actually, it's greater than 0.2 microns, and so I think that's an error right there. Please forgive me. Then as that happens, you create a larger pore for plasma to leak through. What does this look like? Well, I don't know if you can hear that or not. Do we have sound? I don't have to hear. Oops, I'm sorry. I don't have to hear it, but I want to make sure that people are hearing it. Yeah, there you go. There's a little background static. But that's good. That's good. Thanks. But if you notice, you see the yellow ring I told you about? I know this is a polypropylene oxygenator. Same exact oxygenator as the one that I showed you, and this is what plasma leakage looks like. And that's caused either by the phospholipids creating that channel or swelling the fibers and stretching and expanding the porosity of the microporous hollow fiber. So the solution to membrane wetting, plasma leakage, is a material known as polymethylpentene, or PMP. However, there is only one manufacturer, and that's 3M in Germany, that manufactures this particular fiber. And what was caused from that was, of course, a shortage in the height of a pandemic, which was a very big problem. So that's sort of the point of my talk here today is, what are you going to do? Can you use a polypropylene? Well, you know, you look at this. Yeah, hold on a second. If you look at this video, you're probably going to be horrified and say, no, I'm not going to use a polypropylene microporous hollow fiber for ECMO, because that's what I'm doing here, and that's what we see. But why does it happen? We understand that now. How can we attenuate that? I'm going to teach you a little bit about that. So this membrane, as an integral asymmetric hollow fiber oxygenation membrane, again, I consider this submicroporous. They will use the term that this is, and it's plasma tight. That's another term you're going to hear a lot of, but they do call it a membrane. I view this as submicroporous versus actual membrane material. And they have an Oxy Plus, combines the performance characteristics of the oxyfan, which is polypropylene, with a dense outer skin characterizing it as a diffusion membrane. This dense outer skin prevents the passing of liquids like blood plasma or water into the pores, even during prolonged application, and avoids direct contact of the blood with air or oxygen. Now, in a microporous hollow fiber membrane oxygenator of polypropylene design, that is a diffusion gas transfer device also. So this is a little bit of marketing going on here. You really don't have a direct gas to blood interface like you would in a bubble oxygenator, for example. As the outer skin is very thin, the membrane has excellent permeability for oxygen and carbon dioxide. The gas exchange performance is equivalent to that of the microporous membrane's oxyfan, which again is or oxypan, which is a polypropylene version. And the membrane is made of course, PMP. But there's one manufacturer, it's 3M. So this one's made from that fiber. The Quadrox, the square oxygenator, is made from that fiber. I believe the tandem oxygenator, the one with no heat exchanger, is made from that fiber. I know that the MC3 is made from that fiber, the one that Medtronic distributes for Dr. Bartlett's company. I'm assuming, I don't know for sure, but that the Abiomed ECMO oxygenator thing that they have is also PMP. I would think that not too many people are going to use polypropylene in a design of things like that today. But polypropylene oxygenators still will continue to exist because they're great for on bypass, and they're much more affordable. And there's no real reason. I can't tell you, I don't think I've ever had a plasma leak in the operating room, even doing a long case that may have taken all night on pump. So I haven't had that experience anyway. Somebody else may have. If they have, I'd love to know, but that's not been my experience. The process for PMP uses a traditional polypropylene fiber and adds this submicroporous covering also referred to as plasma tight. It is not, however, a true membrane, however, tight enough to overcome significantly the wetting complications in two ways. One, there is less phospholipid reactivity, A, and B, because it is submicroporous, the pore sizes are much, much smaller, so less prone to leaking even if swelling and having some increased size. The increase in size is not enough to allow for the plasma leakage. The end result is an oxygenator with extended time and less subject to lipid degradation. There are plenty of papers out there of PMP fibers wetting out and leaking. It can still happen. It is far less frequent than you would find with a polypropylene fiber, but it does exist. So if you look up here on the top left, you have in the white area here gas phase. You have down here a liquid phase. You have hydrophobic porous asymmetric membrane, which is this material here, which is really not a membrane, but this is basically your hollow fiber. And you have a liquid phase. And you can see here in this section, if you had, this is normally hydrophobic, right? This section right here and here, but if you had lipids adsorb, which are hydrophilic, and they start to swell, you can see how this would start to distend and become larger, allowing for the plasma to leak out from the liquid phase to the gas phase. Here you see this non-porous layer, which again, submicroporous in my view, but you can see how it separates the two. And this is what it looks like cross-sectionally. Here's microporous, and again, this is made from the exact same materials. It's just you have this skin that you see here. So here are the microporous without a skin. Here it is with a skin. Same representation, gas, micropores, plasma, and here you have plasma infiltration actually being demonstrated. And you have gas, you have plasma, you have your pores, but you have this submicroporous polymer layer, or skin, if you will. And that's the difference between polypropylene oxygenators and polymethylpentene oxygenators, summed up in that one slide. What we have to take seriously into consideration is availability. There was a shortage. Longevity, cost, infection risk, embolic events, and inflammatory mediator production. So, as I said, there's a single source for PMP, and there recently were back orders, production issues. We had COVID, middle of a pandemic. People were scrambling to get the Quadrox oxygenator, and in fact, Levanova was having real problems filling all of their orders for their version of the PMP, the EOS oxygenator. And it's an excellent oxygenator, by the way. I really do like it. And I like it for a variety of reasons, and one of those reasons is we have been really working aggressively towards non-anticoagulant, zero anticoagulation protocol for our veno-venous ECMOs. Significantly has reduced our bleeding complications. I've been very impressed with it. But we have not had any thrombus problems with the oxygenator as long as we have good flow. We haven't had any thrombus problems at all because we haven't had that circumstance. I've had thrombus occur somewhere else, but it came, I think it came from the patient, but we're not 100% sure. But it was not the oxygenator. There are other oxygenator designs that are more prone to clot generation. But of course, if you run out of them, you have to do something. So I think that's part of the controversy of all of this is if you run out of of PMP fiber, and they can't make the oxygenators and they can't get them to you, but you have patients that really need to be taken care of. We have to be able to do that with what is our traditional cardiopulmonary bypass, elective coronary surgery, valve surgery, heart surgery patients. Longevity favors PMP. So notwithstanding there are failures, they on average will last much, much longer. If you use polypropylene, you have to be very, very sensitive to the use of propofol because it's a lipid, and also patients that are hyperlipidemic. I told you I was going to teach you what to do, and I think I got ahead of myself here. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll just repeat it if I have to. If the patient is grossly hyperlipidemic, you can almost anticipate you're going to have early oxygenator failure. When I say early, couple of days, 4 days, in that range, if you're using polypropylene. If you're using propofol, the same exact phenomenon will occur. So you need to use Versed and fentanyl, or you need to use Presidex, or whatever your flavor may be. But avoid propofol at all costs if you have a patient that you're having to do ECMO on with a polypropylene hollow fiber oxygenator. If they're grossly hyperlipidemic, then it's really a smart idea to do therapeutic plasma exchange, and you can do it directly through your ECMO circuit. You can use a filter-based system. It does not have to be centrifugal. The filter-based systems for doing therapeutic plasma exchange, like the Baxter Gambro Prismax machine, has a TPE capability that's filter-based, and you can really accomplish a lot by getting the lipid profile of the patient down and extend the life of your oxygenator significantly by doing that if you need to. Cost, however, favors polypropylene, no doubt about that. It's at least double, if not triple, the cost for the oxygenator, PMP versus polypropylene. And then you have infection and inflammatory mediator mitigation, and it's a somewhat controversial topic, but I'll have the discussion because I think it's worth having. And that is that I feel like, and you know, I'm going to show you these images first because I think these images bring my point home. This is a Quadrox oxygenator, and this is the return side or the patient side, and you can see it full of clot. It's a CT, post-exchange. Here you see a tremendous clot burden, and here you see on the outlet, this is the arterial side, you see tremendous clot burden in this oxygenator. And I'm going to tell you, you wouldn't even see this in your pressure drop. This wouldn't even be detected in your pressure drop unless you measured oxygenator blood volume using the transonic ELSA meter or something like that. You would never know that that clot was there, but that clot's going to break off and go downstream. So it's something that really bothers me. But not only is it going to clot, break off and go downstream, that's only one aspect of this. That clot, if you have a patient who's septic, becomes a nidus for continued infection because antibiotics aren't going to treat the oxygenator or the clot. And so that is a huge problem. And so I've got difficulty, and especially with the corners, because you're going to have areas of stasis there, which again are a problem if you have an infection. You can clear the infection from the patient, but you're going to reinfect them because it's never really going to clear because until you change the oxygenator, but you may not think you need to because it's running just fine. And I think that's one of the problems that I have with these devices. So my philosophy is that, do I really want an oxygenator that will last 20 days, 25 days, 30 days, 35 days, and leave the patient on one system for that length of time without changing it? From an infection mitigation viewpoint, that's a really bad idea. So let's see how long polypropylene hollow fiber oxygenators actually last on patients, you know, in a non-controlled setting. In other words, we're just going to use it and count the days and see what happens. We're not selecting patients based on lipid profile. Now, the only thing we are doing is not using propofol. And if we did use propofol, it became apparent very early, and I can show you that as well. So I think that changing the system helps to reduce infection, even though you are taking a risk by cutting into the system, adding connectors, and reconnecting it and doing a new system. I think that the risk of that potential contamination is far less than the risk of the ongoing contamination and infection source that you find by leaving the system there full of blood and clot burden and everything else for that many days. I think it's really, for me, it's controversial, but it really bothers me and I don't like it. Inflammatory mediator mitigation as well, that's also controversial. I, have always seemed to see, and this is something that's anecdotal, but it's my two eyes looking at a whole lot of patients that I've done this on, that when I change the oxygenator, they pink up. They look really good. Now, they'll eventually go back down to where their baseline was, but that's happening for a reason. And we know that polypropylene, and I'm assuming polymethylpentene as well, but I'm not positive, but I know polypropylene is a very good adsorber of inflammatory mediators. So you can really remove a lot of bad juju by doing that, by changing it all out and clearing some of those things, getting adsorbed. And maybe that's the reason I see them kind of perk up and look better for a period of time, and then they, again, go back to their baseline. We looked at that. Flow and clot detection in the ECMO system. This was done from Stockholm, Sweden, and this is just the pump that they used. Here you see clot inside the actual centrifugal pump, and here, if you look very carefully, you can see clot in a connector. So clot can develop and hang around and be there in a lot of different places in an ECMO system, not just the oxygenator. And again, that's why when I change the ECMO system, I change the entire ECMO system, the oxygenator, the pump, because we don't use the cardio help, which is integrated. We have two separate components, the pump and the oxygenator part. But I change it all. I think if you're going to change one, if you can change it at the cannulation site, the cannula itself, I think that's ideal. Sometimes that's hard to do. I'm kind of getting away from it. I did it for the longest time. But now I just go ahead and prepare my lines on a sterile field, prep everything up, do that stuff, and then I try to keep my line length long enough if I think we're going to ambulate the patient, but short enough to reduce my hemodilution effect and to not have a bunch of redundant tubing, which could then have its own problems getting kinked and getting pulled and other things that can happen, which, it's a treacherous environment, yet such important, sensitive stuff. It's very interesting, the dichotomy that exists there. This is one of my cases, and if you look right here, you see a big clot right there at the inlet of the pump. This is the inlet of the pump, or the negative side. This is the positive side of the pump, or the outlet. And if you look, you see this ring of white right here, and this is actually cavitation. That's air, but that air didn't come from the patient, didn't come from a source outside. It came from the negative pressure and basically drawing gas out of solution. This is cavitation. And so this had to be changed, obviously emergently, but the patient was doing pretty well, thankfully, and tolerated the change pretty well. Now, he didn't like it, but the patient had enough reserve to tolerate all of what happened, but happened very acutely. And actually, the first indication was a very loud noise of this pump head. Let's see if I can make that work. Yeah, this whole pump head decoupling from the base, which you see in the back here. So the magnet decoupled. We heard the really loud noise. Flow, of course, went to zero. We got it started again, and after getting it going again, we didn't know why it decoupled. Then this happened. We snapped a quick picture as the other system, they had gone to get it, and we found that right there. So I was able to get a good picture of that. I got ahead of myself. This is my opinion based on my observations. Patients that have a high inflammatory process going on, they really seem to improve hemodynamically, perk up, if you will, after I change the oxygenator, and I believe that's because of clearing by adsorption inflammatory mediators that may be in the patient. It may just be that system has something else in it. It may be generating. I don't know, but I do notice it. It's what I see. This must be weighed against the risk of the changeout. Obviously, you can't just, willy-nilly be changing these things. You have to be ready to do it, plan it. Don't do it when it's a crisis, because if the patient is really unstable, it's very hard to get it done in that fast a period of time. But it can be done safely and in a sterile fashion. So can you use polypropylene hollow fibers for ECMO? Well, you can decide. Is it don't push, pull only, or don't pull, push only? It can be a somewhat confusing thing. So let's look at our 2020 initial oxygenator type selection. If it was VA ECMO, 100% of VA ECMOs were put on VA ECMO with a polypropylene microporous hollow fiber oxygenator. If it was VA, the VA ECMO was 0. Okay. For VV, 59% were put on with polypropylene, and if it was, and 41% were put on with the PMP. So that's our percentages. For VA, and this is VA, with initial polypropylene lungs, we had 9 patients. Only one of those patients required an oxygenator change out at day 1. And remember what I told you about propofol. Use propofol, it can create a real problem. However, that patient was on ECMO for 4 days. In fact, the highest was 4 days. The last 4 patients were on for 4 days. And that's typically what we see for our VA ECMO run. So in this case, it was 1 out of 4, 25% that had to be changed, and I don't believe we would have had to change it had we not been giving the patient propofol. Nevertheless, 3 days, 3 days, 2 days, 3 days, 3 days, and all the rest of them did not need to be changed for any reason. So, if you're having a shortage of PMP fiber oxygenators, and you're looking at VA ECMO, which may be a short run, even VV ECMO, should I do my first one with polypropylene to try and preserve my PMP so that I don't run out of those for patients that I think are going to be on much longer term? I think these are questions that have to be asked, especially when you're dealing with high resource utilization and low resource availability paradigms, as one finds in a respiratory virus pandemic when it is related to microporous hollow fiber oxygenator technology. I'm sure that makes sense to a lot of people. So this is another representation. This is 37 patients total. It's divided up in these various bars. Initial oxygen, this is VV ECMO. If the initial oxygenator was polypropylene, it's a blue bar. If it was initially PMP, It's an orange bar. The green bar represents the total days before the oxygenator needed to be changed, and the yellow bar represents the total number of days any one patient was on ECMO. And just to make it a little easy, if you look down here at the little red things here, every single one of these is polypropylene as the initial choice for oxygenator. And there are 22 of those out of the 37. And what you notice is, in this case, this patient was only on for 2 days. Okay? This patient was on for 9 days. This patient, 11 days. And if you look here, days to change, this was 5 days, this was 4 days, this was 3 days, but only one change. This was 4 days. Patient was on for a total of 15 days. This was 13 days. Then that actually had to be changed. No, it didn't have to be changed. Initial PMP, that one didn't have to be changed. I'm so sorry. Over here, 1 day. Over here, this patient was on for a total of 9 days with no need for change. 8 days, no need for change. 6 with a change at 4. 3 with a change of at 5 days, and that should be obviously more than that. That doesn't make sense. 13 with a change at 7 days. So you see a theme here. They last somewhere between 7 to 10 days. Is not uncommon. 4 to 10 days. You can do things to stretch it out to about 10 days. But if you look at the days on ECMO, we have a 26 and a 25, and we predicted that actually, because if you see, we started right off with a PMP. We have a 20 and a 36, we have a 27, we have a 39. So, you know, we had some longer runs, but most of these, if you look at 27, it might have had been changed once or twice, maybe. And if the patient was stable, why not? But, you know, nevertheless, we did use PMP as an initial and didn't have to, and it was actually changed on day 1, but I don't think that was related to the oxygenator failure. I remember that patient, and it was for a different reason. This was changed at 13 days, so it didn't last the full 20 days. This one was changed at 4 days. This is a PMP. This one was changed at 20 days. And we didn't change it just because we wanted to change it. We changed it because there was clinical indication to change it. So this slide, I believe, is validation for me that I can use polypropylene oxygenators for either VA ECMO or VV ECMO in the event I do not have PMP, or I am needing to conserve my PMP systems for patients that I know are going to be longer runs, possible with ambulation. That's the goal, is to keep them on ECMO, maybe get them extubated, putting them on ECMO awake because I'm going to be taking them downtown for a lung transplant. Those are the patients that I'm going to selectively choose PMP on. Versus the patient who I think is just going through an insult that is going to hopefully, there's the plan, that's sort of the way we view it, that they're going to recover in a week, 2 weeks, 14 days, 21 days, right in that range, and be coming off ECMO. So that is my preference. And I want to point something else out to you. And this is very important, actually. I'm going to go way back. Going way back to the Wayback Machine, actually, they're right here. What I want you to look at here is, just because this happened, this is not an emergency. If you look right here, this is the arterialized blood. This is arterial blood. It has great transfer. This is happening, and you can't leave it. You just can't. It looks bad for number one, and you just can't leave that. So you do have to change this system, but it's not an emergency, and it doesn't just stop working. So you have plenty of time. You see this starting even before it looks like this. So you know it's coming, and you can be very well prepared for it. It's not acute, and it's not catastrophic by any stretch of the imagination. So I think that was an important concept I needed to add to this. And then, if I may, summarize, microporous hollow fiber oxygenators are the standard of oxygenators today. PMP fiber is a coated or sheathed fiber that is submicroporous. PMP fibers have less reactivity to lipids, contributing to longevity, but can still plasma leak. Polypropylene fibers have lipid reactivity, causing plasma leakage. However, they are far more readily available because there is more than one manufacturer, because there's only one current manufacturer or source of PMP. All oxygenators and ECMO circuits have areas of stasis, even round ones, but it's certainly worse in systems with corners, and I think that is common sense. Polypropylene may adsorb inflammatory mediators, and again, that's controversial, my opinion. When you look at using CRRT, there's many times you use an AN69 filter for that very reason because of the charge on it, and it's very good for adsorbing inflammatory mediators, and sometimes you'll go through a filter a day trying to accomplish that, even over several hours, until you get enough inflammatory mediators cleared that the filter doesn't filter doesn't clog, not clot. Polypropylene oxygenators are used for standard CPB hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times a day, probably thousands of times a day. Worldwide, probably even more than that. Polypropylene oxygenators can be used safely for long-term ECMO, and by long-term I mean a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even 30 days. But you must manage the lipids and do not use propofol. Very important. Okay, so I think it is time, if you don't mind, for a short break. And I'd like to come back and do part 2 of this program, which is going to be talking about where we are here in Houston with the pandemic, which may be reflective of where you are, wherever you're watching from, through this pandemic. So if you would give me a, let's say, 5 minutes, that would be fantastic, and we'll come back and try to knock out part 2. Thank you. Okay, now we're back, and welcome back, everyone. Let's go ahead and just jump right in, both feet, to part 2 of this session. So this slide, all of these slides are coming from the Texas Medical Center resource for the trends going on right now with COVID. And this is the effective reproduction rate for the greater Houston area. And so if you look at it, basically what it says is if it's down here at 0, of course, that would be, oh, come on. That would be 0 reproduction. In other words, how many people is one person giving this to? So half a person, all the way up to about 0.8, is considered, anything less than 1 for 15 days, is considered community control. If one person is giving it to one person and more, so all the way up to 1.5, 2 people could go higher from there, one person transmitting it to multiple people, then that is considered community spread. So that's what the effective reproduction rate means. So you can see that last week we were at 1.33, and the previous week we were at 1.58. So it's a little bit better, but it's still in the community spread. So each one person last week that had it gave it to 1.33 people. So you can see that that would grow over the course of a lot of different people. Here you have the daily new COVID-19 positive cases for the greater Houston area. And what you're looking at here, again, is community control is less than 200 cases for 14 days. Well, new cases last week were at 507, and the week previous to that was 398 per day. So you could see that things are getting a little worse in this regards. And we have well beyond, I think at this point, we're definitely in community spread by a more than double, so 2.5 times in that particular case. So, and what's the point of this? Well, the point of this is that if we have another surge and more ECMO patients, it is very possible, and this could happen to you too, that you will again have a shortage of whatever flavor oxygenator you want that's made of PMP. Every manufacturer will suffer the same shortage because there's only one source for it, and if they have a shortage, everyone has a shortage. You may need to have an alternative, and I don't want people afraid to use a polypropylene oxygenator for ECMO in the ICU. There's no reason to be. I've done it for years, and it's you know, yeah, it doesn't last as long. Some do. Some last as long, but mostly don't. But you have an easy system to change and a plan in place. Avoid the lipids, like I said. No propofol. Control anybody that is hyperlipidemic. Do therapeutic plasma exchange on them. You can actually run these things a lot longer than one would suspect. This is daily new cases. We just just as I'm sorry, what I do, as a graph, and you can see the trend going from 619 to 718. So over the course of a month, and you can see the red line starting to climb here. And you see this area is represented in this, and you can see here that the numbers are starting to trend up. Now, nowhere near where they were back in December and January when we were just absolutely overwhelmed. But I get very concerned when I'm starting to see a blip coming back up again, and I'm looking at these trends as well. And I'm not going to get into the politics of all of this nonsense about vaccines, no vaccines, who's getting vaccinated, who's not getting vaccinated. That isn't my intent here. My intent here is only for one thing, and that is to discuss how do we manage the resources we have to take care of patients who may get sick from COVID-19 or something else, for whatever the reason is, and we have an issue with getting hollow fibers. And I think my intent going over all of this data is to show that there, I know there's a lot of noise out there, but we are seeing more cases. That's just a fact. That's what I'm seeing. Maybe somebody else somewhere else is seeing something else, something different. We're seeing another bump. How far it's going to go, I don't know. It just might be a little blip, but it could just skyrocket, and we don't know at this point in time. Here is the weekly average of TMC daily COVID-19 hospitalizations. And again, you see the first surge, you see the second surge, and you definitely see now another increase, which is almost double from the week before. So again, something to be concerned about. And you can find this, by the way, online if you go to, what is it, tmc.org? I can't remember. This is really a good site to go to. Let me see what the website is, because I don't want to tell you something. No, it's tmc.edu. So really good website to see what's going on in the Houston metropolitan service area, statistical area for COVID, and gives you a lot of good information that I think is useful for us as medical practitioners, whether you're in Houston or somewhere else, because these things, I think this just moves around, and what we see here, what we see someone else going through, we eventually seem to go through it, and what we go through, we get kind of towards the end of it and starts looking better, and then we see it happening over there at someplace else. So there does seem to be this geographical timing of all of this stuff. This is the TMC COVID-19 positive patients that are in the hospital at this time. And basically the light blue, which is on the top, is in here, and then here this sort of funny bluer color, almost tealish color. This is med surge. If they're in the ICU, they're down here with this blue, or no, I'm sorry, backwards. This is med surge, this is med surge, the top is ICU, but you see the total number of patients, whether it be the medical surgical or it be the ICU, is getting more, getting higher. And again, here you see this drawn out in a graph with a trend line, and you see this right here starting to come up. Very important, again, to be concerned about this. This is a totally different hospital. It is within the Houston area, but it is not a TMC facility. I went ahead and redacted the names and the place, because I think I just didn't want to reveal that. But this is written by the CMO, and I woke up this morning and thought of the movie Groundhog Day, where Bill Murray's character gets trapped in a time loop, forcing him to relive February 2nd repeatedly, as we now face our fourth surge of COVID-19 patients. I'm beginning to know how he feels. I knew the chances were good that we'd see another surge from COVID-19 because of the spread of variants, but now that it has happened, I've decided to do what Murray's character eventually does in the movie: reframe the situation to focus on the positive. We know what to do, and we know how to do it well. For some context, today we have 203 COVID-19 patients in our hospitals. almost double the number we had 1 week ago. This should be no surprise, but the vast majority of our COVID-19 patients are not vaccinated. And the ones who are vaccinated have serious underlying conditions. Now look, I'm just going to tell you, this isn't politics. This is just real, okay? This isn't an agenda. These are just facts. You know, we talk about that all the time. You know, people say it all the time. You can have your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Facts are facts, and these are facts. Also of interest during this surge, the average age of patients in our ICUs is 55, compared to an average age of 65 in January. And for patients not in the ICU, the average age as of today is 55 compared to 62 in January. So you see a little bit younger patient. To see how the rest of the TMC is doing, please visit the site. Now, this isn't a TMC hospital, but they are affiliated with TMC. The person wrote this, said that they will echo with Dr. So-and-so, saying what is the same in this surge is our incredible team of nurses, physicians, and all employees who are being called upon to provide unparalleled care yet again. I am deeply grateful and deeply confident that we can do this again. To me, I could have done without the last part. I don't think I can do this again. And I'm really, really hopeful that we don't have to do this again. I think we're just going to see more cases, but I am hoping not at the level and with the just the veracity of the last surge that we went through. That was really horrific, and I don't want to go through that again. This is a chart that comes out of, I think it's out of the WHO, if I remember right, and you see the red is patients who have a real high community spread. Orange is community spread escalating. Yellow is potential for community spread, which is everywhere. And green seems to be doing great. So America, Samoa, and I think it's is it the Northern Marianas Islands? I think that's what it is. They're doing fantastic, so we need to go there. But even Guam and Hawaii are yellow, which potential community spread. But look at Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, and Florida. I mean, they're really blowing up with cases right now, and they're, you know, close to Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi and Texas, where I am, and Oklahoma and Arizona and Kansas. So, you know, we're a very mobile society. Those people aren't going to just stay right there, and hopefully we can get this figured out and get this under control. I wanted to go over the latest updates on guidelines from ELSO, because I think this is critically important for all of us to be aware of, and this is published, of course, in a SIO, and it was May of 2021. A multi-center French study of 83 patients with COVID-19 related ARDS managed with ECMO revealed an estimated 60-day mortality of 31%. Now, I can tell you, it's a French study, I can tell you we aren't having outcomes like that. Ours isn't a 60-day mortality of 31%. Ours is a 60-day survival of 31%, and possibly even lower than that. Though I have some hope with a recent patient that we've done. I got to tell you about her. Subsequently, data from ELSO, the ELSO registry, reported an estimated cumulative incidence of in-hospital mortality 90 days after ECMO initiation of 37%. Again, that is very exceptional. We are not seeing that. And my friends around the country that I know aren't seeing that. So with that said, please take these numbers, I am, with a little bit of skepticism. This report included 1,000 patients with COVID-19 who received ECMO in 36 different countries. An additional observational study reported 45% mortality for 1,500 patients from 77 centers in Europe and Israel. Important point. According to pandemic historical data from the ELSO registry, VV ECMO, or veno-venous ECMO, results in an approximate mortality of 40%. That's agreed upon. Veno-arterial, VA ECMO, 55%, and ECPR has a mortality of 71%, so about a 29% survival. Mean VV run duration is generally longer, 12 days, than VA, 7 days. Remember what I talked about, and go back, and whether you're using polypropylene or you're using, so VA ECMO, I'm never going to choose to put a PMP fiber on that patient, because VA is usually, for us, is only going to be, 2 to 5 days in that range. If it goes longer, then we'll switch them out to I think it's going to be a long term. I'll switch them to a PMP when it becomes appropriate, For patients with COVID-19, mortality is similar to historical VA ECMO mortality. I can't say I completely agree with that. That's not what I've seen. However, mortality is still being determined with ongoing data collection and may be increasing. And so I think that may be the issue, is other people are seeing it as well, but it may not be getting into the data banks. Median 14 and 20 days and mean of 18 days run duration appears to be longer with patients on COVID, well, that have COVID or are on ECMO due to ECMO-associated lung failure. In the great majority, greater than 90% of reported cases, VV ECMO was utilized for COVID-19. Some patients with COVID-19 developed myocarditis, massive PE, stress cardiomyopathies, arrhythmias, and acute coronary syndrome. And I don't know if, I know there's a lot of controversy about whether the vaccine can cause myocarditis or has caused it or not, or DVTs, not exactly sure, but we know COVID-19 does, which may require mechanical circulatory support like VA ECMO. Data on VA ECMO for COVID-19 are limited in the ELSO registry study and may be found in small case series, making the utility of VA ECMO for COVID-19 related cardiogenic shock less clear. As a general guide to practice, we recommend the use of ECMO for patients with COVID-19 and severe cardiopulmonary failure who meet traditional criteria and when appropriate resources are available. Very important point there. Given the paucity of, or the small amount of available data when prior ECMO guidelines were published, this guidance has been created to summarize currently available literature and offer recommendations to update select areas within the previous guidelines. This document will focus on care specific to COVID-19 patients receiving ECMO and recommended alterations in the utilization of ECMO during a pandemic. We recommend referral to existing guidelines for general ECMO practices. Survival with VV ECMO for COVID-19 related pneumonia and ARDS is similar to historical data for other causes of acute severe or ARDS, meeting VV indications in the ELSO registry. This suggests that COVID-19 could be considered similarly to other causes of reversible infectious pulmonary disease, with awareness that COVID-19 patients may require longer runs. However, mortality in this population may be increasing over time, and updated data should be considered in decision making. Very important. I highlighted it for that reason. It is currently unknown if COVID-19 patients requiring VA ECMO have similar survival compared with historical data. So again, take that as it be that as it may. If you have a patient who has cardiopulmonary failure because of COVID, I think we just need to use our traditional algorithms and hope that that patient's disease is reversible. But I think that if we have another surge and resources are grossly limited, understanding and having to make the unfortunate decision about futility of care may have to be something that's done earlier on in the process based on all available data and experience on any one particular patient. Some key recommendations from ELSO: VV ECMO may be utilized for patients with COVID-19 and severe respiratory failure, ARDS, with expected outcomes if they are comparable to patients supported with VV ECMO during this pandemic. VA ECMO may be utilized for patients with COVID-19 and severe cardiac failure. However, this experience is more limited on a global scale. Mobile ECMO is feasible and may be conducted safely for patients with COVID-19, and mobile ECMO means we go out to some community hospital, put the patient on ECMO, transport the patient back to our hospital. That's what that is describing. Organized ECMO centers within geographic regions to coordinate patient referrals where feasible. Unify patient selection criteria across a geographic region where feasible. Contraindications for ECMO use should become more stringent as ECMO capacity diminishes. That's a tough one. Data submission to facilitate research is essential for our evolving understanding of optimal ECMO care for patients with COVID-19. And this is an important point highlighted. While some centers have increased their anticoagulation targets, bleeding remains a concern, and there is no data to recommend deviation from conventional anticoagulation goals. There is no data to recommend deviation from conventional ECMO practices, blood product transfusion thresholds, tracheostomy, endotracheal extubation, rehabilitation, cannulation configurations, or ventilatory management. Another key important point: potential discontinuation of ECMO in the setting of perceived futility should be clearly discussed with patients and their surrogate decision makers. And then rarely, children can require ECMO support for severe ARDS, myocarditis, multisystem inflammatory disease. In children, ECMO patient selection and management should follow conventional guidelines. You know, that's one of the things that I had a real problem with early on, was we were not taking care of these patients that were there before, because we're taking care of these patients here, and these patients were taking priority over those patients, and I was finding a lot of these patients were really sick, and not all. Some of them were perceived as futile. Not all of them were, but they were really sick. And we had a lot of patients sitting over here that were, you know, we could help very easily and predictably would do really well, and they were having to wait and getting worse and having their own problems. There was a lot of collateral damage associated with this pandemic. What is the definition of futility for termination? This is the most important thing that I will say to all of you today. And of course, I'm not the one saying it. I'm reading it. It's from ELSO. What is the definition of futility for termination? Not all patients will improve with ECMO support. As is standard with usual ECMO care, clinicians should be continuously evaluating when ECMO no longer provides a positive benefit-risk ratio and should at that point return to conventional management regardless of how long the patient has been on ECMO. Very key. During times of limited resources, this becomes especially important. And while the definition will be hospital or region specific, observing no longer cardiac recovery after approximately 21 days on ECMO can be considered futile, and the patient can be returned to conventional management. For situations where withdrawal of life-sustaining therapies is not an option, this change of management does not constitute withdrawal. So what they are saying here is if you have a patient that is not improving and you are beginning to exhaust your resources, and you have other patients that are better candidates, objectively, clearly, then weaning the patient from ECMO and transitioning them back to ventilatory support or usual management is not considered withdrawal of care. It's transitioning to conventional management, and totally different way of looking at what is an ethical dilemma for all of us at best, more often than I wish it was. But it's a very, very important statement, and I applaud ELSO for publishing this. This is very meaningful and very important. Here they have an algorithm. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through the entire algorithm. You can go through it, and you can find it very easily on in a SIO, and it's you can probably find it from ELSO. But it's a new ECMO indications and contraindications, and a nice flow chart about how to manage ECMO indications in the pandemic environment. And so I think it's a really good thing to understand and to have. It's helpful in our decision-making algorithms. This was a great article by Dr. Barbaro, Ryan Barbaro, out of Michigan. Did I say it wrong? Hello? No. Magic? Did I say it wrong? The name? Barbaro? No. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought I said it wrong. I want to make sure I didn't make a mistake. But this is out of Michigan State, and these results support recommendations to consider ECMO in COVID-19 if the ventilator is failing. We hope these findings help hospitals make decisions about this resource-intensive option. The title is ECMO, Last Resort Life Support Option, Helped Majority of Critical Ill COVID-19 Patients Survive. Global study shows. ECMO outcomes study at experienced centers suggests key role for treating worst hit patients as pandemic continues. There was a new study, the article goes on to say, Dr. Barbaro points out, in The Lancet, and provides strong support for the use of ECMO. Short for, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation in appropriate patients as the pandemic rages on worldwide. It may help more hospitals that have ECMO capability understand which of their COVID-19 patients might benefit from this technique, which, of course, we know how it works. Small studies published early in the pandemic had cast doubt on whether ECMO really was useful. Still, the international team of authors cautions that patients who show signs of needing advanced life support should receive it at hospitals with experienced ECMO teams. This is another tremendously highly prophetic comment, and that hospitals should not try to add ECMO capability mid-pandemic. Now, the manufacturers, they want you to do that. And I am so appalled at some of them for trying to sell this to every hospital in the country that you have to have an ECMO capability. Machines are great. You got to have the experienced people that know how to run them, and there's a lot. It is a resource-intensive procedure. If you are not an ECMO center, please don't try to become an ECMO center overnight. It is the wrong thing to do. Get your patient transported out. Have someone come with an ECMO circuit and get the patient on ECMO. Do something besides trying to put the patient on ECMO unless you have the experience and the resources and the multidisciplinary approach towards being able to manage these patients, because they are very challenging at best and can be even more so at times. This is a slide, a graph that I got from the paper that I found to be, I really had to look at this for a long time. And if you look at it from this number here, which is the color represents patients that died, and it was over 90 days. And if you look at it, it's real interesting that it's right about 40%. Okay, there's 1,000 patients, maybe a little over 1,000, and it's about 400, maybe 410 in that range. So 40% mortality, 60% survival. But this is what I noticed about it. Discharge to home or rehab. In my view, if you're not discharged to home and go on to have a relatively reasonable quality of life, you may be alive, but is that really alive? I understand that's subjective, but I think it's a fair question. But let's just consider home or rehab is really alive. If you look at that, that goes down somewhere about 750, closer to 800. That was pretty bad use of my little light there. Let's try that again. Oh, man. There it goes. I'm going to try to go across. Right about there. 72, 74, in that range. That is a survival, I'm going to call it 25%. That's a survival of 25%. But you look at this, seems like the survival's a lot more. If you got discharged to an LTAC or other unspecified, there's a big chunk that isn't considered died. But I think we all know what that means. Yellow, discharged to another hospital. Again, how many of them are actually alive? They got discharged to another hospital and did what? I've discharged patients to other hospitals before that were on ECMO and they didn't survive. So I know that they all don't. How many? Half, let's say. So let's add a little more. From 25%, we'll go to 30%. Maybe we'll go to 35%. 35%. That's probably a lot closer to reality versus only a 35 to 40% mortality, which represents a 60 or 65% survival. When you look at it the way I just looked at it, this number is not representative of what really is going on. Now, it's great we've got these, 25% discharged to home or rehab alive. That's great. I mean, certainly. I mean, I'm not saying ECMO is a bad idea by any stretch. But I think that it's very important that we not represent that you have a 60, 65% survival with COVID ARDS, because you don't, and we haven't seen it, notwithstanding there are some people reporting it. And I think, again, discharge to LTAC is still considered alive. But, and it's true, they are alive when they get there. And 90 days is 90 days. You got to look at 91 days. You got to look at 180 days. What's the reality of all of this? And I don't think we have an answer to that at this point. But we've had some saves. We have a 40-year-old woman who has a 7-year-old daughter. She had the worst course for the first month. I thought there was no way this lady was going to make it. And I have to give a shout out to a colleague of mine, Dr. Kevlin and Dr. Kali and Dr. Kumar, who worked, especially Dr. Kevlin. He was the main advocate. He took the patient down to CT, and we looked, and he said there was no fibrotic changes. And this patient was exsanguinating from her oro and nasal pharynx. She was third spaced. She looked absolutely horrible. She was just not getting better. Her SATs were just dreadful. But she stayed single organ failure. She ended up with a little bit of, liver dysfunction, which was considered, and Dr. Maniscalco too. I forgot to mention him. I shouldn't have, but I did. My apologies for that. That was believed to be secondary to the pulmonary hypertension from this disease process, a little right heart dysfunction backed up into the liver, but that has improved. That lady has been on ECMO now 90 days, and she walked yesterday 127 feet. It looks like we're going to be able to wean her off of ECMO. She is still trached. We thought she needed a double lung transplant. It actually looks like she's not going to need a double lung transplant. And she is going to be a survivor. And what made doing what we have done with so many incredible, horrible failures worth every single one of them for this one opportunity to help that lady. That's a reality, and unfortunately, it's a frightening reality because we only have so many resources. There was a time she was considered futile. And so this is this kind of medicine, whether it's intensive care medicine, cardiac surgery, pulmonology, perfusion, critical care nursing, critical care pharmacology, critical care respiratory care, the physical therapy people that are helping this lady with that mobility, that getting her to this point of being able to go home alive for her 7-year-old with a reasonable quality of life. The sacrifice and the stress and the trauma, psychological trauma of all of this has been unbelievable in my view. And all of these people that are taking care of these patients are incredibly gifted and incredibly generous with themselves. So I wanted to pass that along and say that. Thank you for indulging that. In this study, going back to what we were just talking about, we used 90-day in-hospital mortality because this is the highest risk period. And because it allows us to use the information we have to the fullest, even if we don't know the final outcome for every patient. Having data through August, when only a small number of the patients in the study remained in the hospital, was important. Though data are missing on a small number of patients, we saw that on that graph. And even though patients who were discharged to their homes or a rehab facility will likely have a long recovery ahead after the ICU level of care involved in ECMO, they are likely to survive based on our past data and understanding of things. However, and this is so important, the fate of those who went to LTAC facilities, which provide long-term care at a near ICU level, is less certain. And, you know, LTACs are not really known as places that you go after what we're talking about with these patients, where they're going to be able to be rehabbed to go home. A disproportionately large number of those patients are not leaving that LTAC and going home. So with that said, I have questions. If you have questions, no, I don't have any questions. I've answered all of my questions. Have I answered yours? If I have not, send me a text on the FaceTime or Messenger, the Twitter, the YouTube, or call in our phone number if you want to. I'm going to give you about, let's give it 2 or 3 minutes to see if anybody has any questions. I hope it was a good program. While we're waiting, I will tell you that we're teed up for our PerfWeb 65 Vanderbilt University Medical Center Faculty Forum. Remember, it got delayed or got canceled last month because Matt, our wonderful host from there, actually got sick. And did he have COVID again, or he had an aspiration pneumonia? I can't. He had pneumonia. Yeah. So hopefully he's doing well. I haven't talked to him since, but they're going to be talking about. I think we're going to do the pH one. The schedule is likely to change, but it's going to be great. They do a fantastic job. Then we have Tammy Sparacino Journal Club talking about preoperative CRP, or C-reactive protein, as a predictor of postoperative AKI, acute kidney injury, in patients undergoing CAB, or coronary artery bypass grafting, cabbage, we like to call it. And then John Ingram is coming to us with his knowledge nuggets, blood storage effects on the blood components. And of course, after that, or after Tammy's, we'll be doing the Tammy Sparacino Journal Club Casino Wheel Spin. So you could win something cool, a hat, t-shirt, cool phrases, surgical cap, and some other assorted items that we have. And you can check that stuff out at John's friend. I never can remember the poor guy's name, but he donated all of this stuff to us, so we need to give it away. So please call, ask a question, do whatever you want to do, and we'll go from there. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. I did. I hope y'all stay safe. I'm trying. I hope there's a break in all of this and we can all get back to our normal craziness of cardiac surgery and our normal ECMO runs with great outcomes, and we can put this COVID disaster behind us, because I'm certainly ready to. And yeah, let me just thank everybody. You know, that's it. You know, I mean, I think I went a good long time today, didn't I? Yeah. You know what? You know what I know, David? What's that? What do I know? This was best show ever. It was the best show ever. Thank you very much, Magic. It was good seeing you. All of my friends and colleagues out there in Web World. We'll talk to you on August the 4th at 0700. Same place, same station. See you later.